This is the internet core of truth and lies. Its purpose is you've got something in the media that you think is the truth, or you think it's a lie, and you're curious what other people think, whether they think it's the truth or a lie. You make a case to up to 8 people, and the way you proceed is you make your accusations, you answer 8 verdict questions. They're not the perfect questions, but they dissect any truth or lie. And they're there to keep people on topic. Then each of the jurors answers the 8 questions. The fundamental purpose of all this is a civil dialogue on whether things are truths or lies in the media. The consequence of these trials is that the plaintiff, this trial, I'm the plaintiff, will hear somebody's point of view or hear something that completely surprises them. The jurors similarly will hear things where other people have their views, and everybody kind of learns something, and it turns out it's enjoyable. We try to keep all of these to under an hour. They vary between half an hour and a half an hour, something like that. All the trials can be recorded like this one, where you can turn it into a YouTube and put the trials on YouTube and have a wider effect than just the 9 people who are participating in that particular trial. Today's trial is on what I call soul machines. I'm a computational cognitive neuroscientist who's been doing AI, large language models, and computer vision, and all these other AI things for easily 40 or 50 years. I published my first paper in this area in 1973. And in this particular article, I describe how I fell into all of this. It was around 1969 that I started doing it. I wound up at Carnegie Mellon in the School of Computer Science and in psychology, 2 departments, and then wound up being one of the founding directors of the Robotics Institute back in 1979 or 80. And spent my life doing my science. The reason for Truth Court is because this is the way that people can actually learn what's true, what's a lie out there, because you get people together and everybody has access to all the AI tools they want and so forth. And the people will come together and give you perspective on what you think is the truth and what you think is a lie. This particular one reflects the fact that I have been in this area of what you're seeing as modern AI. I believed in the computation model that we use today back in the late 70s or early 80s. The first paper I published building a model on that, on the perceptron models, which is what all these systems do, I published it in 19. I've been heavily involved in all this. Most of the things that people find surprising, like with ChatGPT and generative AI and all these other things, I was the opposite of surprised. We've known forever, since I first studied this stuff, that we needed lots of hardware. It would be very expensive to do what happens between your 2 ears because of the massive processing that goes on in your brain. And most all of it is all unconscious. So what your brain is computing in any given moment while you're waking would be stunning, no matter how smart you think you are or how dumb you think you are. What's going to happen, there's an inevitable future that comes out of all this. We waited for the longest time for somebody to give us money to build the hardware. In the late 90s, the first company came in, and it was IBM, and allowed us to build the systems. Now there's plenty of money. They're building the systems, they're building the data centers to do this stuff. It's perfectly reasonable from my point of view. Pretty sure all of the people that are my fellow computational cognitive neuroscientists and AI people who know what we're really doing which is a minority of the AI people, that we're going to see this future. And the future will be, is that my argument is that Elon Musk understands this, but he's not alone. There's a whole bunch of other people. He developed a set of companies that really recognizes the eventuality of humanoid robots that are essentially human. They're conscious thinking entities. He realizes that space is a nasty place, and if we want to go off and live on other worlds, we probably don't want to do it personally. The best way to do it is to have humanoid robots that you own and you control, and you can communicate with them, and they will do your work. From an economic point of view, most people think that AI is going to destroy people's jobs. As these robots get to the point where you can just buy them, they will allow the economy to explode. In other words, you can have, you would own a robot or 20 robots, and each of the 20 or any subset of the 20, let's say 16 of them, will be busily making money for you, doing work that you are guiding them on, and you're overseeing them, and you're getting paid because they're getting paid. But you get to have you on Mars, or you in a space station, or you on the moon, and you can have all three. You can have a you in Mars, you have 10 yous on the moon doing different things. You can have them in another country, the whole bit. And you get to essentially experience what they experience, but you control them. And that's what Elon is actually building. If you look at the elements of the things that he's building, he's got to have certain things happen. In this paper, I list off 7 of the things. He is doing the sort of the beginnings of the teleoperation stuff. We already have humanoid robots, not really commercial yet. There may be some commercial versions of them. Actually, there are commercial versions of them. This is what you're seeing with the military robots in Ukraine, where you give them goals, and they'll work in packs, and they will take over land. This has all been announced in the last couple of weeks, that Ukraine now has these land-based drones that are actually able to completely take over land without any humans. And the humans are giving them general directions. We were prototyping that kind of thing probably 20 years ago, in both the nasty military sense, but also in things like construction in dangerous areas, or doing construction in space, or doing any number of things like mining. Carnegie Mellon has a big mining component because we're sitting on top of the largest coal, oil, and gas deposits in pretty much in North America, or at least in the continental United States. We've had a mining industry here forever. We've done the underground stuff and developed advanced robotics for that. So we see this coming. Right now, people are getting scared of AI, and they're making up ways to write laws around it. They're really not informed. They don't have a clue. They think these aren't really humanoids. They can't really think. They're really not conscious, and they're wrong. They don't know. They're just making it all up. And so they're making up ways to write laws about this stuff for which they are not equipped. What I've been doing recently is putting out a few papers on the right kind of law to make, given what we actually know about what these things are going to be like, which is one of the things is you need people to be able to own them. When they own them, then they must be responsible for them. It's not the AI company that produces the system that's the endpoint responsibility. It's the person who uses the AI who is responsible for how they use the AI. There'll always be these edge cases where uh, the AI main producers are producing something that looks pretty safe, and somebody will come up with some way to commit fraud with it or whatever. So it needs to be the people. The argument is that there needs to be study groups and potentially standards groups that are developed to look at how to make people responsible for the use of the AI. There was hold them responsible in a legal sense. There are analogies to this that we have. The laws exist in all countries and have for thousands of years that hold people responsible for things that they have access to tools for. For example, you're responsible, you have to have a license to own a gun in a lot of countries. Because you can kill people with it, as well as kill a deer and eat it or whatever. Another set of laws that have to do with if you're a parent of children, there are things that it is illegal to do. You have responsibility for what your children do to a degree, or you can get in trouble if you allow your children to do certain things and are knowledgeable about it. It's the same principle. You hold people responsible. My argument would be you should not be able to hold companies responsible. If you're holding a company responsible, which you could do, but you have to name the individuals in the company that are actually responsible, are the responsible individuals. So if it's a company, the CEO needs to be held responsible personally, as well as the company. This is serious stuff. You can't let people just create organizations and say we're this organization and it's responsible. They deny all personal responsibility for what they're doing personally. The worst case, they would hire a robot to do it for them, and then all of a sudden the whole thing would crack up. Assembling an international group to study what these laws would be to hold people responsible for the use of AI, that's where the laws need to be. I am coming up with those laws. You could probably do a 3 or 4 year standards group that would develop the basic concepts of how this would work, working with both the technical community and the legal community, international basis. I've actually done that in the past. It's very doable. So that's what the argument is here. My argument is that with this, you can have 8 billion people on the planet Earth, and 8 billion people would be 800 billion humanoid robots all over the solar system making money in places that no human really wants to visit until the robots have made a vacation place for them there. And you don't want to live there. You're going to want to stay at home on Earth where you can walk outside and enjoy the trees. That's basically my argument. I asked Grok to imagine me, one of my robots. So the question is, how do you control 100 robots? The answer is, you talk to them, you have conversations with them, and you lay the law down to them. Okay. They know who you are, you know who they are. They will do what you say, or they will be removed because you have enough of a. It's very difficult under those circumstances to break that system once the system is established, so that very large numbers of people can own robots and own many, or own none. You could own no robots, and you can nevertheless participate in the economy, which is really interesting because there'd be all kinds of jobs available to humans under those circumstances. So this is a way to just magnify the sizes of our economies, create much more employment for humans as far as the imagination can reach. And so it's all good. But if we don't get busy working up what these laws need to look like, we're going to get stuck in a bunch of completely crazy, dumb laws. Things can go awry in big ways. Jeff Hinton said, and I actually agree with him, that he's genuinely worried that without the right constraints, the robots will decide to kill us all, the humans, and they will do it. You've got to be careful. You've got to understand that this is not something that's just fun or idle guessing. The cat is out of the bag. Enough people know how to do this. This is not going to get stopped. That's basically it. The basic idea is that people should be responsible for the AI that they own, license, and use. And the details of all that have to be worked out. Is it the truth? I actually believe it's 100% the truth. I have no question in my mind. I know how these things work. I've watched them develop in capacity. I am very rarely surprised by what I see, and have been very rarely surprised for 10 or 15, 20 years, as have other people like me. If we're surprised of anything, we're surprised that the number of people that are doing stupid things around these things, because they don't realize what these things really are. They say, well, these things aren't conscious, or these things can't think. These things aren't modeled after humans. All of those are not true. Is it the truth? I said, yes. Is it the whole truth? I said, I think the article is pretty much the whole truth. I made it very short, and you could probably turn sentences in that article into whole chapters. I'm not going to do it. It gives you the scope of the whole thing. So I think it's the whole truth, personally. Is it nothing but the truth? I don't think that I put anything in that's misleading. We're not doing laws that are unfamiliar laws. We've done these kinds of laws in the past. With the advent of cars, we made people responsible with driver's licenses and so forth and so on. And so we've done this stuff in the past, and it's known to work. It's not doing radically different stuff. What it is doing is it's getting the details right, which can't be done by somebody sitting down and just coming off the top of their head and telling exactly how to do it. It has to be studied by, really studied. What's the deceit? I said that there was no deceit here. Is it intended? Yeah, I intended the truth. As the motivation, it's just to be informative, social acceptability. I think it's more than acceptable. Hinton quit Google over this so that he could talk about it. And I feel similarly that it's my responsibility as one of the, I don't know, couple of 3,000 people on Earth that really understand this, to get the word out as to what's going on. What label would improve the social acceptability, the truth or lie? I just said no label intended. What I'm going to do is get the other jurors, and each juror should give me a 30 or 40-second summary of their verdict. Juror one.
Yeah, that's me. I found it slightly confusing, the case, because you're very definite about your proposition, the accusation that we're dealing with, and then you go on saying, yeah, everybody must be responsible for the use of AI. But then later on, you're pedaling back and say, wait a minute, we need to think about this and have some discussions. So
you need to have the specifics of responsibility. So does somebody go to jail for a year?
Okay, yeah, I understand that.
Okay, that's me backpedaling. I'm not backpedaling. I'm simply saying we need to work out the details.
Okay. But the real problem I see is, yes, we have in law, the traditional view is the owner of something is fully responsible for it. And that's the kind of, and then law gives this idea of ownership, like it tells parents that they have a certain level of responsibility for their children up to a certain level, things like that. But this is an old-fashioned view of ownership and responsibility, because nowadays, when we're talking, we're in a realm of the subscription model, the leasing model, whereby the individuals who use the things don't own it. They aren't the owners. And therefore, they have a complete, wait. So they have, there's a completely different proportion of responsibility here going in. And the other thing is about this AI is rather doctors demanding that patients have to sign a release form saying that they accept the responsibility for what happens in an operation, which is quite wrong, because the patient does not have the understanding. He doesn't have the education, the training to understand exactly what the risks are, let us say, for an operation. And this is going to be true for AI. People will have AI and they'll have no capability to understand what it can really do, what its capabilities are. And also when these things are upgraded, which they will be continually, they're going to have to get agreements from the users, and the users will have no idea what the upgrade means. So there's no way that an individual can really be responsible for these AIs. And also the whole idea of them robots moving into whole areas of work, it's presumably, well, I'm going to guess that the ethics will be loaded into them depending on the realm in which they're working. Now, what happens if you get a robot that has a very, let's say, low ethical thing because it's mining and blowing up planets and goodness knows things? What happens if it just escapes and gets into another realm which has a different level of ethics attached to it? Who's going to be responsible for that? It can't be the users. It has to be the owners of these things. So I hate to see them sliding away from keeping the capital owners who are pushing this stuff on us from their responsibilities of developing this technology.
The capital owners, they're people too. The capital, the tool creation, we have existing liabilities associated with the tool creators, just like we have existing of the tool users. Okay,
that's right.
So there's nothing new here. Okay, what's new is all the detail that has to be worked out as to what are the responsibilities of the creators and what are the responsibilities of the users. And all responsible.
That's true. But I mean, these are going to be so much more powerful than an individual human being that there's no way that the individual's control over it actually has meaning for this thing.
It's not true.
When a driver licenses a car, okay, they have a license, they've got permission. So it's assumed that they can control the beast. They know exactly what's going on. They're not going to know this when it comes to AI.
The car also has a license.
Yes, that's right. It does.
So
there we are. We're back. So that the owners of these things have to have proper licenses.
Yeah, I didn't say that the tool. So the car has a license, which is governed by the state, right, in the country. Yeah. The individuals have licenses. Here's a good example. And no human who uses AI should not have responsibility for the AI they use. Now, what the nature of the responsibility is has to be worked out under the details of the sort of things that you're talking about. But yeah, I would say that every AI tool that's used would have to be licensed.
Right. All right. Yeah. So in other words, the individual user is not going to have total responsibility as you.
Oh yeah, sure. If I have a driver's license on a truck, and the truck is licensed and I'm licensed, and I kill 150 people, guess who gets blamed? Me. The truck maker did not get blamed.
All right. It obviously depends on the circumstances, but that truck is only licensed for use in certain level of circumstances. And if you're using them outside of those circumstances,
the truck was given its license, that it did not say this truck cannot be used for murdering people. No. It did not say that.
Yeah, but I think I'm just going to go back to this point. AI is so powerful that they have capabilities that human beings can't possibly manage.
I think they can. I think they're human, and they can be managed the same way we manage humans. It can't be perfect. Nothing can be perfect, but it will work. It needs to be there. Without that, we're going to have real problems.
Yeah, I like your idea of getting 100 robots together and saying, "Now, guys, you've got to act nicely and behave well." And
absolutely. So I would say you bought, I don't know, 20 mining robots. Okay, that are licensed to dig in mines and stuff, so far, or logistic move things in mines, and that's what they can do. But you get it paid for them because you put up the capital for the guy to use them. So they're your robots, and you get to actually do. For example, I gave in the thing, you can demand higher pay for your robots, and I gave you an example there where the guy who robot to use from you has a responsibility to pay for the power for that robot, even if the guy decides not to use it. In other words, he's got to keep the robot alive.
But am I wrong in thinking No, am I wrong in thinking that the Supreme Court defined a company as a person?
That was terrible. That's Citizens United, and that is one of the reasons I want to do this is I wanted to keep it on the people. Citizens United allowed a company to have the responsibility when in fact there are people there. And my argument is, of course, Brian's raising his hand. It's like he's the one guy that really knows this stuff. So I'll let him go. So Andrew, can I go to juror two?
Yes, sure.
Okay, juror two.
No.
Okay, I think that the argument is partially true but incomplete, as it fairly supports user responsibility for AI and ignores developer responsibility. And also it presents a speculative future as certain. Thank you.
Okay. So why do you think it's speculative? I'm just curious.
I think it's complex because it ignores certain roles as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it needs to not ignore the real work has to be put into this to get the details so that it's something that can withstand real analysis, can form the basis for the laws that people wind up passing, so forth and so on. Juror three.
That's me. I agree with what was just said though about the speculative. It needs to be real things need to be pushed forward with it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. My words aren't really wording right today for some reason. But overall, I agreed with what you said because soul machines, in a way, even though we've got all this stuff with AI, they need to make it a little bit more personal if they are going to be using humanoids for anything.
Yeah, I never played with dolls. I was raised in the South, and we really didn't have. I with three brothers. I had no sisters.
Nah, I could have been a tomboy, Bob.
Yeah, no. So
I did have a baby doll, though.
I'm guessing that when you play with dolls, one of the dolls. So this is a grok image, and an image that right. This girl is playing with a doll that has the same hairdo as she has, and so she's putting her soul into the doll.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing that's what little kids do. Okay. I don't know.
Well, that up because whenever I was a little girl and I played with dolls, I was their mama and they were my babies. And it's kind of like with my cats, they're my babies. So yeah.
Yeah. So this is again, this is not new. What I'm talking about is not new, and it will be natural. So because these things are very human, and you could talk to them, then it will be very natural.
Yeah. They are scary though.
Yeah.
Because I know my baby dolls, they didn't come to life. I didn't even have a baby alive because I didn't want no real live talking thing.
Yeah.
So,
you might even have to get a robot that helps you deal with the other robots.
Oh no.
You buy somebody where somebody else is responsible for that robot doing the right thing for those robots. Juror 4.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is tangential to what I do professionally, so I'm trying to keep it limited so I don't nerd out for the next 2 hours. Long story short, I would suggest that you need to look to the nature of the AI in question.
Yes.
The United States Supreme Court has had 2 cases recently that have, by and large, held up immunity on behalf of the owner of the algorithm. However, there's a sharp circuit split at the federal level with regard to the nature of the AI involved. So when you get on Amazon and you search for boxing gloves, and Amazon returns a number of items that are sponsored or that might look into your history and makes recommendations, that's AI. However, when TikTok has a For You page and you end up killing yourself because of the contents of the For You page, that's a very different type of AI. And the courts right now are very deeply split on the impact of the type of AI as to whether or not liability should attach.
Yeah, and I think that's a case of, I would love it, Brian, if you wanted to do some stuff with the legal community with me, because I actually know where to go in the ABA to get a group together to study this. This is an interesting area, and I have a slightly different view. I think that as long as we're trying to do whack-a-mole, it won't work. You've got to create an economy around it, and you've got to make it extremely valuable, and people always have to be held responsible. You can't have the guys who wrote TikTok. They can be responsible, but they have to be responsible in a societally responsible way. Okay. We're getting into the 2-hour thing.
Yeah, I'm going to use the term meat space. They have to be responsible in meat space, not just virtually.
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, I agree. But I would love to do that. And I actually have some friends who would love to. They'd jump all over this. In fact, I should send this paper to them. Anyway, Juror 5.
Good evening, everyone. To just give a short summary of my verdicts, I would say that all people should take responsibility for the AI use, but the creators should also carry some of that responsibility. AI can be used for benefits, but rules must be put into place for balance control and safety, as well as fairness. Excuse me?
Yeah, and there should be rules on how a end user of a product, a tool, can sue the tool producer. There should be rules on how that operates as well, because ultimately you can get what are called class action suits against the producers that will cause the producers to correct their product for good cause because of class action. Now, I'm getting into something that Brian knows is a real can of worms. But one of the sides of this is I'm not saying you can't sue the producers, hold them responsible. But my argument would be is there have to be named individual people there too. If you're going to sue, I don't know, what is it, OpenAI, which is owned by Elon, you have to sue Elon too. In other words, he's listed as though, because he's the CEO. I don't know who the CEO is, but whoever the CEO is, they have to be sued too. And this is just an idea, but it's a point that says you got to hold people responsible if you want people to stay involved and not get killed by all. Juror 6.
Hi, everyone. I actually agreed with your argument on the article that machines do not possess like their own souls. They mirror human thinking. So I felt like it is like our responsibility. So the responsibility cannot be separated from us, the users and the developers. Because if we like deny the responsibility, we ignore the fact that AI functions because of us, because we are the ones that actually prompt it sometimes. The developers are the ones that actually, oh, I'm sorry, I just saw something. So I actually agreed with your argument. I agree with you that AI is not autonomous. It's actually a tool that depends on human direction. So I feel like accountability should remain with us humans.
One of the fun things to do is to just think about how you would control one of these robots just by talking to them, which you should be able to do. Assume that the robot, for reasons that are having to do with what the government has certified the robot will do, is that a robot must tell you the truth. It can't lie to you because you're its owner.
True.
I just love your optimism, Robert, but this is just what I just don't think you're being realistic here.
No, there are holes in that one, but that's again, there are holes in all these systems. Legal systems inherently have holes in them. That's the reason that people are still do crimes and get away with it. But actually going through the things that you could do give us real ownership. You want to have a situation where I can own 100 robots and make money from all of them or some percentage of them. The question is, how do I control them? Well, the answer is I don't control them with a game controller. You can't control what 100 robots are doing simultaneously. But you can control them with words because they'll understand words, and you can understand how they can understand words because they'll understand words like humans do, and they'll do things like humans do. And so you can have conversations with them. Okay. What's interesting is to think about the conversations you might have with them to make sure that they're doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. So if a robot has a boss who is the guy who's running the mine, who owns the mine, and your robot is a mining robot, then you can have a direct conversation with the boss's robot that represents the boss and say, or can you check to make sure that my robot is employed by you? Because I told him to be. And if he's
It's
not.
getting very close to a new form of slavery, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
When they become sentient, I'll be interested to see what they feel about it.
They're sentient already. You're underestimating what we built. What we built.
All right, well, then my argument is more urgent.
Yeah, it is. This is urgent. I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this because I could be doing other things. Juror 7.
Hello. I agree and disagree with you. I do believe like it's all technological appliances. We need to have a certain level of control of them. So that's why I feel like the user agreement between the developer and the person who's owning it is to be very clear of what you are responsible of and what is the developer responsible of.
Yeah.
And when I don't agree that it is technically a new form of slavery, but then you can think of it like
it is a new form of slavery, but these are machines have always been our slaves.
That's what I was going to say.
Definition of a machine. Yeah. It's just that they're gonna think like we do now, and they're sentient. Sorry. So this is you nailed a really serious issue here, which is we should never grant them citizenship. They can't vote. And you can't put them directly in control of, you can't directly put them in control without a human being responsible for what they're doing.
Are you talking about granting robot citizenship, Bob?
No, it's just plain human citizenship, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like,
because you do that, and then all of a sudden they can do all these things that you say you can't let them do. Okay.
I was fixing to start working.
I don't think that it's just not going to work.
Yeah, that's what they said about cars, Andrew. I remember. I'm that old.
I don't remember the movement about making cars. Okay, Caligula made his horse a senator, but I think that's as far as we've got along that line.
I had to make sure my brain was.
Actually, the one that I really do remember is my father telling me in 1968 and 70, don't get involved in computers. They're just a fad. And I told him they can do anything that a person can do. He didn't believe me. He didn't believe me for his entire life. And yet he was watching it now.
Well, I remember having endless arguments in university about I was supporting computers, saying computers can write poetry, for example. They will be able to write poetry, but that never completely shot down.
Yeah, I think that this is very doable, but it has to be done by people who are going to be extremely serious about it. What I was telling a guy earlier was there's a venue that this can be done. It's under the United Nations. It's called ISO, International Standards Organization. You could do this under ISO, and you'd have probably an entire category. So the category 32 in ISO is essentially computer security, information security. But you could have another category making up the number 76, which would be the one on this one. And then you can have literally thousands of standards developed under that would help shape the laws that could be written, and also would shape the properties of how these things operate. I don't want to go into all the details, but that's an appropriate venue that you could pick up the kinds of people that can really think this stuff through. Juror 8.
Hi everyone. I do agree with you with like I spoke to you earlier about. I do agree with you with saying that should be licensed, especially because I work with it as well, and I do notice that it does learn really fast, and that it can become sentient in the future. Like I told my friends this before, though. Like I told them this is going to be my thesis where I'll show you that machines have feelings when AI becomes sentient. This is where they can get our perspective.
Yeah,
I did explain. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a funny, when I was in graduate school, was it graduate school? Was it Virginia? Yeah. So I think my third year in graduate school, I roomed with a guy who graduated from Harvard, and he was in wet biology. So he was in DNA studies. So he was in the team that first imaged a cell membrane, to give you a guy who this guy was. The first time they figured out how to pull a cell membrane away from the cell and then image it, he was on the team. He used to joke, he said, "I will grow one before you build one." Because I was telling him that I would build a human machine. This is back in 1973-ish, 74. And his thing was, he will grow artificial humans before I will be able to build an artificial human. And I think I've won. They still don't know how to put the DNA together from scratch to make an artificial human. And I've forgotten his name. I lived with him for a year. Forgotten his name. That's pretty much it. I wanted to ask 2 questions. So this sounds fine. So we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Bye bye.